Thank you. Your time, your trust, and your comments keep this community alive. As you listen, share your thoughts, feelings, and lessons below, so we can learn together. Settle in. The truth and the twist are coming. Let's get into it. What shocked me about the situation was not the money he lost. It was the moment he stopped being a husband and became a silent rescuer, because that is where the real damage started. One lesson from the story is simple. When somebody you love says, "I do not want to worry you," pay attention, because secrecy almost never arrives alone. The first thing I sold was a duplex on Park Heights that my uncle helped me buy when I was 32 and still thought hard work could fix everything. It had green shutters that never sat straight and a narrow strip of grass tenants never bothered to water. I signed away on a windy day in late February, wearing a navy sweater that still smelled faintly like bleach from the maintenance warehouse. I told myself property was just property, bricks, paper, equity. My wife, Corinne, was lying in a hospital bed at Sinai in Baltimore with tubes in her arm and a monitor ticking like a nervous clock. She was what mattered. I sold the rental house in Randallstown 3 weeks later. Then I emptied the savings account I had started for retirement back when my knees still let me jog around Druid Hill Park. Then I cashed out a small investment account I never told anybody about, not even Corinne, because I liked knowing there was one corner of the future I had managed to protect. After that, I borrowed my truck. I did it all with the same calm face I used to wear in front of tenants when a pipe burst or a ceiling sagged. Quiet, practical, solvable. That is the role I knew best. If you have ever watched somebody sacrifice everything for love and thought, this cannot end well, stay with me. This story takes a turn most people will never see coming. Like this video. Share with somebody who believes love should never require silence. And subscribe for more powerful relationship stories like this. Corinne had gotten sick in pieces, which made it easier to dismiss. First it was fatigue, then swelling in her legs, then nausea that she blamed on cafeteria food at the elementary school where she worked attendance. She was 51, beautiful in a careful way, always pressing her blouses on Sunday nights while listening to old Anita Baker records. Corinne believed in neat stacks, straight corners, and thank you notes written by hand. When she finally fainted in our kitchen beside the crock pot, I caught her before her head hit the tile. I still remember the chilly smell in the room and the spoon clattering under the stove. The doctor said autoimmune complications, organ damage, treatment plan, medication costs, extended recovery. The language was clean and professional. The bills were not. They arrived thick and white and insulting, like the envelopes themselves had no shame. I work as a facilities supervisor for Baltimore City Schools. I know boilers, busted locks, ceiling stains, and the particular noise old radiators make in November. I do not make the kind of money that stands up to catastrophic illness. Insurance helped just enough to make me angry. Every statement seemed to say the same thing in different fonts. You can love somebody completely and still be priced out of saving them. Our daughter, Nia, wanted me to ask for help from the family. She was 24, living in Silver Spring, sharp-eyed and impatient with pride. "Daddy, this is not the time to act strong," she told me in the cafeteria, while stirring powdered creamer into bad coffee. My younger daughter, Simone, called from Philadelphia and said she could start a fundraiser through her office. I told both of them no. Not now. Not yet. I said it the way I say no to contractors trying to overcharge the district. Firm. Closed. Final. That was my first decision. That could have gone differently. I chose dignity over openness, and I dressed it up as protection. Corinne slept through most of March. When she was awake, she apologized for things that were not hers to carry. "I know this is a lot," she whispered once, eyes half open. I squeezed lotion into her dry hands and told her to stop talking like that. She looked at me with gratitude, and something else I did not have a name for then. Fear, maybe, or distance. The nurses liked her because she still said please and thank you when she could barely keep her voice steady. She kept her braids neat even in bed. She asked about everybody else's day. Corinne was always good at keeping herself from becoming the center. In April, I sold a brownstone. That one hurt. It was the first serious money I had ever made. I bought it after 16 years of changing filters, fixing leaks, and doing side jobs out of a dented toolbox in my trunk. I used to stand in front of that building at dusk and look at the upstairs windows glowing yellow and think, you did this without inheritance, without shortcuts, without anybody clearing the path. I sold it in 26 days to a couple moving from Washington. On closing day, the title clerk offered me a bottle of water and called me Mr. Green 3 times. I did not correct her. Corinne came home in early May with a paper bag full of prescriptions and a face that looked older around the mouth. Recovery was supposed to feel like relief. Instead, it felt like tiptoeing through a house after a storm, checking every room for hidden damage. I set alarms for her medication, tracked sodium, took leave from work, and cooked bland meals she barely touched. She thanked me too often. She kissed my cheek instead of my mouth. At night, she turned away in bed and folded her hands under her chin like she was trying to make herself smaller. I blamed the pain first, then the medicine, then I stopped naming it. By June, Corinne was taking walks alone at odd hours. She said movement helped. She started carrying a canvas tote I had never seen before, dark blue with a museum logo on it. She changed the password on her phone. She took calls on the front steps instead of in the kitchen. Once, she came home from the pharmacy with no pharmacy bag, just a glazed look and damp eyes. I noticed because I have always noticed things. Loose hinge, missing key, different detergents. Men like me can mistake observation for understanding. I saw every detail and still missed the shape of what was happening. There was one Tuesday morning when I almost asked her directly. She was standing at the sink rinsing berries one by one, lining them on a paper towel like tiny red marbles. I walked in, saw her phone face down on the counter, and felt the question rise all the way to my teeth. Who are you talking to? Where are you going? What are you hiding? Instead, I asked whether she had enough refills on the anti-rejection medication. She said yes without turning around. That was my second decision. That could have gone differently. I chose control over truth because medical facts felt safer than emotional ones. The first real crack came from a receipt. It fell out of Corinne's tote when she left for the shower. Not perfume, not dinner, not some motel cliche from a cheap television script. It was a printed receipt from a law office in Towson for certified copies and filing fees. Her name was not on it. The man's name was Darien Cole. I stared at those 2 words so long they stopped looking like language. I did not know any Darien Cole. My heart did what frightened hearts always do. It ran toward the worst explanation, because the worst explanation gives you somebody to blame. I wish I could say I handled that moment with maturity. I did not. I checked the glove compartment in her car. I went through the trash. I searched our bank app at midnight. Screen light glaring in my glasses, while Corinne slept beside me breathing shallowly. Nothing obvious. No secret account. No romantic gifts. Just a pattern of cash withdrawals in small amounts from ATMs in different neighborhoods. Mondawmin, Pikesville, Charles Village. Not enough to scream affairs by themselves, but enough to make my mind build ugly architecture. Once suspicion starts pouring concrete, it does not ask permission. The next week, I followed her. I am not proud of that sentence, but I would be lying if I made myself nobler than I was. She left the house at 10:15 in a cream cardigan and low-heeled loafers, carrying a blue tote and a folder hugged against her ribs. I waited 5 minutes, then took my truck. She did not go to a clinic. She drove downtown, parked near Mount Vernon, and walked into a row building with brass lettering by the door. Cole and Mercer Consulting. I saw the name through my windshield and felt heat rise in my neck. Darien Cole was not an idea anymore. He had a door. I sat there 43 minutes counting buses, cyclists, and reasons I might still be wrong. When Corinne came out, she was not alone. A tall black man in a tan sport coat walked her to the curb. He touched her elbow while speaking. She smiled, tired but real, then looked down before getting in the car. That was enough for my wounded pride to create a full movie. By the time I got home, I had imagined texts, lies, gratitude turning into intimacy, and all the sour little betrayals men tell themselves they would have spotted sooner if they were not so busy sacrificing. That night, I heated soup and barely tasted it. Corinne asked whether the broth needed salt. I almost laughed from the sheer cruelty of ordinary conversation, surviving moments like that. She sat across from me at our oak table, shoulders narrower than they used to be, wedding ring loose on her finger from the weight she had lost. I wanted to slam the receipt down between us and demand a confession. Instead, I watched her lift the spoon with both hands and blow across it carefully. The woman I thought might be cheating was still weak enough to tremble over soup. That made my anger feel ugly. It did not make it disappear. My oldest friend, Leonard, owns a barbershop off Liberty Heights where men come in for shape-ups and leave with arguments about football, city taxes, and whoever is acting foolish in their family. I did not tell him everything, only enough to hear myself say out loud. Leo snapped a cape around a boy in his chair, lowered his clippers, and looked at me through the mirror. "You sold all that for her?" he asked. I nodded. He pressed his lips together. "Then ask questions before you play detective. Hurt men are terrible narrators." I remember that line because it made me mad on the spot and embarrassed me later. I did ask, eventually, but not cleanly. One humid evening in July, with cicadas whining outside and the church down the block rehearsing music through open basement windows, I asked Corinne who Darienne Cole was. Her face changed so fast I knew I had walked into the right room, but the wrong story. She did not feign confusion. She did not pretend I was crazy. She just went still. "How do you know that name?" she asked. I told her I found the receipt. I did not admit to following her. She closed her eyes and pressed her thumb to the edge of the table until the knuckle whitened. "I was trying to handle something," she said. "For us." Those last two words, "for us," almost offended me. Men in my position can become accountants of sacrifice. I had balances in my head. Brownstone, rental, savings, truck loan, sleep, pride. For us it sounded too light, too convenient. I asked whether handling something for us required private meetings with another man. Corinne flinched at the way I said to another man. She stood up slowly, one palm on the table for balance, and said, "You already decided what this is? So what exactly do you want from me tonight?" Then she went upstairs. That sentence sat in the living room with me long after she closed the bedroom door. "You already decided what this is." I wanted to reject it, but I could not. I had decided she was unfaithful because betrayal made cleaner sense than complexity. Betrayal has a villain, a wound, and a direction. Complexity asks what role your silence played. Around midnight, I slept on the couch with the television off and the street lamp throwing stripes across the floor. At 3:12, I heard Corinne come downstairs for water. She stood in the kitchen a long time and cried softly enough that I could have pretended not to hear it. The next morning, my daughter Simone called during her train ride and immediately asked what was wrong. Daughters know by the shape of your hello. I told her too much and not enough. She was quiet. Then she said, "Daddy, did Mom ask you to sell everything?" I said no. "Did she know you were doing all of that?" I said not really. She exhaled hard into the phone. "Then maybe you need to ask whether she feels grateful or trapped." That one cut. Not because it was cruel, because it was possible. I had built a monument out of rescue. I had never asked whether she wanted to live inside it. 2 days later, Corinne left for another meeting, and I did something I am still ashamed of. I opened the locked desk drawer in our room with an old spare key from the junk jar. Inside were medical papers, medication schedules, a yellow legal pad, and a sealed envelope with my name on it in her handwriting. The first line was enough to make my chest hollow out. "Malik, if this comes out the wrong way, you'll think I betrayed you before you understand why." I stopped reading right there. Some last part of me knew that crossing one more line would change the kind of man I was. When Corinne came home, I told her about the envelope. I told her I opened the drawer. I told her I followed her downtown. I expected fury. What I got was exhaustion. She sat in the armchair by the window and looked older than 51, older than sickness, older than marriage. "I was waiting until I had something solid," she said. "I thought if I told you too early, you would stop me." That answer made me defensive before it made me curious. "Stop you from what?" I asked sharply. She looked at the floor and said, "From going after what belongs to you. Here is where I think things truly went wrong, and I want to pause on it for a second." He believed sacrifice gave him moral clarity, and she believed secrecy would spare him stress. Both of them chose protection over partnership, and that is how marriages get divided without anybody physically leaving. I would not have handled that silence well either. What about you? At this point, would you have believed her, or would you still be bracing for the worst? Corinne asked me to sit down before she spoke again. She told me Darian Cole was an attorney who specialized in property fraud and concealed transfers. Back in the hospital, while I was running between billing offices and pharmacy counters, she found one of the closing folders in my work bag. She learned I had sold the brownstone without telling her. Then she found the rest. Every property, every account. I started to interrupt, but she raised her hand. No, let me finish before your pride starts talking over me. I had never heard her say anything like that to me in 27 years of marriage. That is how serious she was. She said she was not angry that I paid the hospital bills. She was angry that I decided, alone, to dismantle the future we had built together and call it love. You kept saying, "Do not worry, I got it," she said. But that was not comfortable. That was a curtain. She told me she had been terrified while recovering, not just about her body, but about what would happen when she got well enough to stand in the wreckage. We had spent decades planning carefully. One rental for each girl someday, maybe a smaller house near the water when retirement came. Suddenly all of it was gone, and I had not even let her speak. Then she slid a folder across the coffee table. Inside were photocopies of signatures from the brownstone sale, loan records, transfer dates, and one ugly surprise. My cousin Terrence had been the investor who connected me to the buyer. Terrence, with his smooth church shoes and eternal business ideas, had steered the sale toward a company he had a hidden stake in through 2 LLCs. The house sold below market. The speed I had praised as mercy had actually been leveraged. I felt my stomach tighten as Corinne pointed to the overlapping names, shell addresses, and notarized forms Darian had traced. "He used your panic," she said, "and you trusted him because you were drowning." Terrence had always known how to sound helpful. He called everybody family, the same way some men say my brother, before charging you interest. After my aunt's funeral, he once tried to sell prayer journals from his trunk. Still, when he showed up at the hospital parking lot in a camel coat, talking about quick closings and cash relief, I let him. I remember the February cold and his hand on my shoulder telling me, "This is how we keep you above water." I heard rescue because I needed rescue. Seeing his name buried in those documents made my face burn. Shame as heat. People do not say that enough. Corinne had used the cash withdrawals to pay Darian quietly because she did not want me confronting Terrence before the paperwork was ready. She also did not want me abandoning my treatment schedule for her and running myself into another emergency. "You were not sleeping. You were grinding your teeth at night. You forgot to eat," she said. "I thought if I told you, you would make it a war before I had evidence." She was right, which annoyed me almost as much as a fraud. I would have made it a war. Men who feel foolish often rush to become loud. Loudness feels like authority until the facts arrive. I asked the question I had been avoiding from the start. "And Darian?" Corinne stared at me, hurt spreading across her face like spilled tea. "No," she said. Not dramatic, not offended, just tired. He was kind to me because I looked like somebody who had been lied to twice. I believed her then, fully and finally, and the relief almost made me nauseous. What broke me was not proof of infidelity. It was a realization that while I was busy suspecting her, she was quietly trying to recover pieces of life I had burned through to save her. My love had been real. So was my arrogance. Darian filed for an emergency injunction on the brownstone transfer and a fraud claim connected to Terrence's undisclosed interests. We could not reverse everything. The Randallstown house was gone for good to an unrelated buyer, and the truck loan still sat on my back like a stone. But the brownstone case had teeth. Terrence had rushed documents, misrepresented value, and pocketed money through a structure so sloppy it insulted the very idea of cleverness. Baltimore greed often wears cheap cologne and overconfidence. We met Darian together in August. He wore the same tan sport coat. I hated that I noticed. He was patient anyway. The legal process was not cinematic. Nobody burst into a room. Nobody confessed under pressure, while a judge stared them down. It was emails, affidavits, continuations, comparative appraisals, and long afternoons in a quiet office near the Washington Monument where the radiator hissed like it had opinions. I took unpaid hours off work to gather every text with Terrence, every bank record, every signed page. Corinne came when she felt strong enough. She carried hard candy in her purse because the medication left a metal taste in her mouth. Sometimes, during meetings, she would press her thumbnail into the wrapper before speaking, as if grounding herself. Nia found out, because families always find out. She came over one Saturday with a lemon pound cake from a bakery near her apartment and looked at both of us like she was auditing a weak explanation. "So, let me get this straight," she said. "Daddy sold nearly everything in secret. Mom hired a lawyer in secret. And both of you thought the other one could not handle honesty." Nobody answered right away. Then she shook her head and laughed once, not because it was funny, but because sometimes absurdity is all a grown child can hold without crying. "You two are made for each other," she said. "That is the problem." In September, Corinne started therapy, not because of the suspected affair, obviously, because sickness had cracked open things she had carried too long. She told the therapist she was tired of being the composed one. That phrase stayed with me. Corinne had spent years balancing everybody else's feelings with the skill of a woman, trained young not to be difficult. The oldest daughter, the dependable worker, the church volunteer who remembered funerals and food allergies. Even her anger had always come folded small. Now it came out cleaner. She told me when my hovering felt controlling. She told me when pity sounded like respect wearing the wrong coat. I had my own reckoning. I realized I did not just fear losing Corinne. I feared being seen as inadequate. Selling everything gave me a role I understood. The husband who did whatever it took. It let me outrun the smaller, uglier fear that maybe I was not enough to shield my family from disaster without destroying something to do it. That is not noble. It is human, and humans can make a religion out of being needed. In therapy, I said that sentence out loud and hated how true it felt. My therapist, a soft-spoken man in Owings Mills, nodded like he had heard it before. When the case finally moved, it moved because Terrence got careless. Darian uncovered emails showing he knew the property was worth more and coached the buyer to emphasize speed because the husband is desperate and wants quiet. Reading those words felt like swallowing thumbtacks. The legal settlement came in November. The company agreed to unwind the brownstone transfer in exchange for damages from Terrence and a structured payment arrangement that kept them from going to trial. In plain language, I got the brownstone back, but not for free. We inherited a mess, fees, and a monthly burden. Still, it was ours again. Bruised. Complicated. Ours. I thought victory would feel cleaner than it did. Instead, I sat in the car outside Darian's office with the signed settlement on my lap and cried from a place deeper than anger. Corinne reached over and held the back of my neck the way she used to when I came home sore from double shifts. "I know," she said. "That was all. Now I told you so. Not now, do you see? Just I know. Grace can undo a man faster than punishment." I had been preparing myself to survive betrayal. I was not prepared to be met, again and again, with patience I had not earned. We told Simone over crab cakes at a little spot near the harbor because she refused to hear major family news by phone anymore. She listened, set down her fork, and asked Corinne whether she ever planned to tell me before the case was underway. Corinne said yes, but she kept waiting for the right day, the right energy, the right opening. Simone nodded slowly. "There is no right day for truth in this family," she said. "There is only before damage and after damage. Leave it to the youngest to cut right through us." I wrote that line down later on the back of a grocery receipt. The winter after the settlement was our hardest season, not because of money, though money was still tight, but because the drama had ended and we still had to live with ourselves. Resentment does not leave just because facts arrive. Corinne still resented being shut out of the decisions that wrecked our plans. I still resented that she let me believe, even for a short time, that there might be another man. Neither resentment was entirely fair. Both were real. Healing, I learned, is rarely a clean hallway. It is more like our old basement after heavy rain. Damp corners, hidden mildew, constant checking. One Saturday in January, we drove out to the brownstone with paint samples, contractor quotes, and a folding table in the trunk. Snowmelt ran in dirty lines along the curb. Inside, the place smelled like plastered dust and coldwood. Corinne stood in the front room where I had once imagined retirement income and family legacy and touched the windowsill with 2 fingers. "We can still make something from this," she said. "Not recover. Not restored. Make." The word mattered. Recovery tries to go backward. Making asks what can be built now with what remains. That day, for the first time in months, I believed we had a future larger than the story of our damage. Terrence called me 3 times after the settlement. I let the first 2 go to voicemail. On the third, I answered because some doors need closing with your own hand. He started with excuses. Market timing. Misunderstanding. Everybody was trying to eat. I let him run out of language. Then I told him plainly that family is not a discount he gets to apply after theft. I said he would never enter my home again. My voice stayed low the whole time, and that mattered to me more than yelling would have. Revenge in real life is rarely dramatic. Sometimes it is simply refusing access where trust used to live. Corinne and I began doing something embarrassingly basic that we should have learned at 30, not 50. Every Sunday afternoon, we sat at the kitchen table with coffee and put the week in the open. Bills, appointments, worries, resentments before they fermented, small hopes, who was tired, who needed what. At first it felt formal, almost silly. Then it started saving us. Secrets thrive in vague households. Clarity starves them. Corinne even joked once, while adjusting her glasses and reading down a yellow pad, that our marriage had become a staff meeting. I told her I would take a staff meeting over another silent crisis any day. There's one image that stays with me more than the law office, more than the hospital, more than the closings. It is Corinne on our front steps in a rust-colored robe at dawn. 6 months after coming home, watering the 2 half-dead ferns she had insisted on keeping alive. The street was quiet except for the number 54 bus. Exhaling at the corner. Her body was still healing. Her hands still shook some mornings. But there she was, patient with living things that looked beyond saving. I stood inside the screen door watching her and understood that care is not loud. It is repetitive, humble, and often unseen until you almost lose it. People ask what broke me after she recovered. It was not cheating, because Corinne did not cheat on me. It was worse in a way, because it forced me to face myself. What broke me was learning that the woman I suspected had spent her strength undoing a betrayal committed by my own blood after I ignored her voice and called it devotion. What broke me was finding out that my grand gesture did not make me righteous. It made me dangerous in a quiet, respectable way. Once I understood that there was no going back to the version of myself that always needed to be the rescuer. 2 years have passed. Corinne is healthy enough now to work part-time and complain about school office printers again, which is how I know Grace still exists. Nia is engaged. Simone is thinking about law school, which Darian likes to take partial credit for, though I do not let him get away with too much. The brownstone is rented to a young teacher with twin boys who leave toy trucks on the steps. We are not wealthy anymore. We are deliberate. That sounds smaller than wealth until you have lost enough to understand the difference. Deliberate means nothing in this house gets hidden behind love ever again. If this story gave you something real to think about, do not just move on from it, like this video. Share it with someone who needs to hear this message about pride, trust, and sacrifice, and subscribe for more unforgettable relationship drama stories with lessons that stay with you. I used to think a husband proved himself in catastrophe, in the dramatic moments where everybody could point and say he gave all he had. I do not believe that now. I think the character shows up earlier and quieter than that. It shows up when your wife wants to see the paperwork, when your daughter says, ask for help, when your own fear starts calling itself duty. Those are the real decision points. Those are the places where life either stays shared or starts splitting in two. I sold my properties to pay my wife's hospital bills. What she did after recovering broke me open. That is different from being destroyed. This situation just shows that the worst damage in a relationship is not always the affair you imagined. Sometimes it is a silence around money, fear, and pride. Corinne's secret meetings in Towson. the envelope in the locked drawer, and that line from Simone about truth arriving either before damage or after are the parts one keeps thinking about. I honestly believe boundaries are not cold. They are protective. Financial transparency is a boundary. Honest conversation is a boundary. And when somebody keeps calling sacrifice love while shutting you out, that is a warning sign, even when the intention sounds noble. Think about what you would have done in Malik's place, and also in Curran's. The end.